Have you ever sat down with your partner for a moment of a deep, sincere connection, only to realize you are actually just politely tattling on them?
Oh, it is such a bizarre dynamic and a highly common one.
Right. Today on the deep dive, we are unpacking this exact relationship trap for you. We're exploring a phenomenon that happens in marriages when a moment meant for vulnerability takes a sudden, awkward left turn into what you might call a holy complaint session.
It's a very real thing, and it functions as the ultimate form of indirect communication.
Exactly. So we're pulling insights today from a coaching framework by It's Possible Coaching. It looks at marriage and prayer specifically. And our mission today is to figure out why couples accidentally use these quiet, sacred moments to report each other's flaws to a higher power.
And more importantly, how to transform that habit from a source of strain into a tool for actual connection.
Yeah, because the shift required to fix it is incredibly subtle. But the psychological mechanisms driving the behavior, those are complex.
Highly complex.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the scenario is so universally relatable, even if you don't consider yourself a particularly spiritual person, just picture the setup for a second. Two people sit down together, they hold hands, they close their eyes with absolute sincerity, and one of them starts to pray.
It begins very spiritually.
Very sincerely. But then somewhere in the middle, the tone completely changes. It stops sounding like two people talking to God, and it starts sounding like a very polite airing of grievances.
Yes, the entire environment fundamentally shifts. You start hearing things like, Lord, help my husband be more patient.
Lord, help my wife stop spending money on Amazon.
Right.
You're sitting there, holding their hand, eyes closed, and you get hit with a highly specific critique disguised as a spiritual plea. I mean, it feels like a sneak attack.
It really does.
So why do two well-meaning people who probably genuinely love each other and want their relationship to work, why do they fall into this trap?
What's fascinating here is the psychological environment that a practice like prayer creates. By its very nature, it's designed to be one of the most honest, unfiltered spaces in a person's life.
Yeah, you're supposed to bring it all to the table.
Exactly. When people enter into that mental space, their typical conversational guards drop. Hearts are open, genuine feelings are being accessed, and because of that sudden openness, built-up frustrations just naturally leak out.
They just spill over.
Right. You are encouraged to bring your burdens into that space. And sometimes your most immediate burden happens to be the person sitting right next to you.
I love that phrase, vulnerability overflow. It's like you're supposed to be pouring your heart out, so whatever is sitting right at the top of your emotional pile just spills right out. But when you look at it purely as a communication strategy, the dynamic is wildly passive-aggressive.
Oh, completely.
It's like writing a passive-aggressive sticky note about the dishes. But instead of leaving it on the fridge, you are reading it out loud while holding their hand, addressing it to a third party. And your partner is sitting right there. They are a completely captive audience.
That captive audience element is crucial to understanding why this is so damaging. I mean, you are ostensibly speaking to God, but you are very clearly broadcasting a critique to your spouse.
Yeah.
In psychology, we refer to this kind of dynamic as triangulation. Instead of facing the person you actually have an issue with, you bring in a third party to mediate or observe or validate your frustration. And in this case, the third party is God.
And it creates these painful little zingers. You're trying to be peaceful, and suddenly your partner says, Lord, help him to listen better. Or, Lord, help her with her attitude. I mean, can you imagine keeping your eyes closed while your partner casually drops, Lord, help her with her attitude?
It would take a massive amount of restraint not to open your eyes and immediately start an argument right then and there.
Oh, absolutely.
And that highlights the compounding consequence of this behavior that the source material points out. When this reporting happens repeatedly, even if it starts as a subconscious habit, that shared space stops feeling safe.
It ruins it.
It completely erodes trust. Instead of creating the unity the practice was meant to foster, it builds walls. The person being prayed for learns to anticipate criticism instead of connection.
So they just shut down.
Yes, they stop bringing their genuine self to the interaction.
Which defeats the entire purpose of sitting down together in the first place.
Ah.
I mean, if you're just bracing for impact, you aren't connecting.
No, you're defending.
Right. And this brings up a foundational concept we really need to explore. There's a distinction made in the coaching text that frames the stakes perfectly, I think. It says, prayer was never meant to be a weapon in marriage. It was meant to be a covering over marriage.
A weapon versus a covering. That is such a powerful distinction.
It really is beautifully phrased.
If we think about the function of a weapon, its entire purpose is to attack. It's designed to find a weak point, to expose a flaw. When you use a sacred moment to point out what your partner is doing wrong, you are weaponizing their vulnerability against them.
You are striking when their guard is down.
Precisely. A covering, however, functions as the exact opposite. A covering protects from the elements. It provides warmth, safety, and a barrier against external pressure.
Okay, I love that. But let me play devil's advocate here for a second. The proposed solution to this is to make an inward shift. Instead of saying, Lord, help him, or Lord, help her, you're supposed to shift to, Lord, help me.
Right, the inward shift.
Yeah. So, Lord, help me be more patient, or help me love my spouse better, or help me understand their heart. That sounds great in theory, but let's be real. If your partner genuinely is spending too much money on Amazon, or they actually are being a terrible listener, doesn't praying, Lord, help me just feel like taking the blame for their mistake?
That's a very fair question.
How does a couple balance this idea of a covering without just, ignoring real, tangible issues in the relationship?
That is the essential pushback, and it's why this dynamic can be so tricky to navigate. Shifting to Lord, help me is not about absorbing the blame for your partner's poor behavior, nor is it about ignoring financial irresponsibility or poor communication.
Oh, okay.
It is about understanding the proper venue for conflict resolution.
The proper venue. What do you mean by that?
Well, prayer is not the budget meeting.
Uh-huh.
Prayer is not the couple's counseling session where you divide household labor. If your partner is spending too much money, you absolutely need to have a direct eye-to-eye conversation about the budget. But when you try to merge the budget meeting with a moment of spiritual vulnerability, you end up ruining both.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
You don't resolve the financial issue, and you destroy the spiritual intimacy at the same time.
Ah, I see. So you're polluting the water. By trying to accomplish a practical critique in a space meant for emotional safety, neither thing gets done properly.
Exactly. When you pray, Lord, help me understand their heart, you are not saying their spending habits are acceptable. You are shifting your own internal posture from an accusatory stance to a collaborative one.
You're preparing yourself.
Yes. You are asking for the emotional regulation and empathy required to actually sit down the next day and have a productive, non-explosive conversation about the credit card bill. The covering makes the relationship safe enough to handle the inevitable conflicts that happen outside of that shared moment.
That distinction makes a lot of sense. It requires a tremendous amount of emotional maturity, though. I mean, you have to actively swallow your ego, put a pin in your immediate frustration, and choose to protect the environment first.
It does require maturity, and the impact of that ego swallowing is profound. Think about it. When you hear your partner actively seeking patience or asking for help to love you better, it completely disarms the defensive posture we all naturally take when we feel tension.
You don't feel managed.
No, you don't feel managed or corrected. You feel prioritized. It opens the door for real mutual growth because the focus shifts from fixing the other person to taking responsibility for your own side of the street.
It totally shifts the energy from pointing a finger to opening your hands.
Oh.
But since we are all human and we inevitably mess this up, there's a really relatable scenario in the source material that happens when a couple catches themselves falling into this exact trap.
Oh, the standoff.
Yes, the mildly competitive prayer standoff.
Yeah.
Picture the husband and wife sitting down. The husband starts off very piously, Lord, help my wife be more organized. And without missing a single beat, the wife fires back. And Lord, help my husband remember to take the trash out.
It's the classic escalation. One microaggression immediately met with a counterstrike.
It's a total standoff. Think about the sheer comedy of that moment. They open their eyes, look at each other, and realize they aren't engaged in a spiritual practice at all. They are literally just sitting in their living room, politely telling on each other to God.
It is hilarious, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, that specific moment, the moment they open their eyes and look at each other, is actually a critical pivot point for the trajectory of the relationship.
How so? Because my instinct is that a lot of couples might feel deeply ashamed in that moment. They might feel guilty that they just took something sacred and turned it into a petty, passive-aggressive boxing match.
Shame is the natural reflex, certainly, but it is also the most counterproductive one. Shame thrives in darkness, silence, and isolation. If they close their eyes, pretend it didn't happen, and silently harbor resentment, the toxicity just builds.
Right.
But if they open their eyes, acknowledge the absurdity of what they just did, and actually laugh about it, they diffuse the tension instantly.
So the shared laughter is actually a mechanism for health.
Absolutely. Shared amusement requires a level of emotional distance from the conflict. It means you're both looking at the problem together rather than looking at each other as the problem.
Yeah.
Awareness is always the crucial first step toward intentional change. By laughing at the fact that they are tattling on each other, they acknowledge the unhealthy dynamic without sinking into shame. They see the pattern. And once a couple can clearly see their own dysfunctional patterns without feeling condemned by them, they gain the power to consciously choose a different path next time.
So what does this all mean for how we should actually move forward? Once a couple has that aha moment, once they've had the laugh, cleared the air, and recognized the honesty trap, what does healthy communication in this space actually sound like?
It comes back to creating that safety and unity we discussed earlier. Healthy communication in these highly vulnerable moments reminds both people that they are fundamentally on the same team.
The same team.
Yes, you aren't two opposing forces trying to get a cosmic referee to side with you and issue a penalty to your spouse. You are a unified front facing the challenges of life together. So the language has to evolve. We talked about moving from them to me, but the ultimate, most mature evolution is the U.S. shift.
The U.S. shift. Okay, so instead of trying to fix each other, or even just focusing purely on yourself, you invite strength into the partnership as a singular entity.
Precisely. The language becomes inherently collaborative.
Let's look at what this sounds like practically based on the text. Instead of the targeted zingers, couples utilizing this framework use phrases like, Lord, help us grow together, or help us communicate better, or help us protect our marriage.
Notice how those specific phrases distribute the responsibility equally. When you say, help us communicate better, you are acknowledging that communication is a two-way street.
Yeah.
It inherently rejects the idea that one person is the flawed communicator and the other is the flawless victim. It means the space between the two of you needs attention. It establishes a shared goal rather than a personal critique.
It removes the victim and perpetrator dynamic entirely. And it ties perfectly into the core philosophy of its possible coaching, which is all about intentionality. Strong, resilient marriages don't just happen by accident.
They certainly do not.
You don't just get lucky, find a partner who never annoys you, and coast for 40 years. A strong partnership is a result of choosing to build intentional habits. Habits that actively protect the relationship, rather than putting pressure on it.
That distinction between protecting and pressuring is the perfect lens for this. Every time you communicate with your partner, whether it is direct, indirect, mediated by a third party, or completely unspoken, you are doing one of two things. You are either protecting the bond, or you are pressuring it.
Wow.
When you use prayer as a complaint session, you apply immense pressure. When you use the U.S. shift, you are actively building a protective layer. These small, seemingly insignificant shifts in language, especially in our quietest moments, are the actual building blocks of long-term trust.
It is intensely practical, but the implications are so deep, it really makes you evaluate your default settings. And now I want to turn this directly over to you listening to us right now.
Yes, the reflection part is key.
The framework we've been exploring includes some profound reflection questions. I think these are worth sitting with, whether you are married in a long-term relationship, or honestly, just thinking about how you navigate conflict with the people closest to you. First, have you ever caught yourself using prayer or any other highly indirect method to point out something your spouse or partner does that bothers you?
It requires a lot of self-honesty to answer that. Most of us don't want to admit when we're being passive-aggressive.
It's incredibly confronting. Second question, have you ever been on the receiving end? Have you ever felt uncomfortable during a moment of supposed connection or vulnerability because it suddenly sounded a lot like criticism?
And if you have felt that, notice how it made you want to pull away rather than lean in.
Exactly. And finally, what would practically change in your relationship today if your words, your thoughts, and your private moments focus entirely on strengthening your partner rather than trying to correct them?
Those are necessary reflections. And it's important to remember the underlying encouragement here. Marriage, or any committed partnership, is a long, complicated journey. It is just two flawed humans learning, growing, and inevitably stumbling over each other's egos along the way.
So true.
Nobody's executing this perfectly all the time. But a healthy, thriving dynamic is entirely possible. It just requires a willingness to look at our habits and make small, intentional shifts in how we communicate, particularly when our guards are down.
We've spent this time unpacking the specific danger of politely telling on your partner to God. But as we wrap up this deep dive, it raises a much broader, deeper question for you to mull over. Think about all the times in your life you've utilized a third party to pass a subtle message to your partner.
Oh, that's a great point.
Maybe it wasn't God in prayer. Maybe he was dropping a pointed hint in front of a couple's therapist. Maybe he was making a sarcastic, joking comment in front of a mutual friend at a dinner party, secretly hoping your partner registers the actual complaint buried in the joke. Whatever that third-party vehicle is for you, what is truly stopping you from removing the middleman, looking your partner directly in the eye, and sharing that vulnerability straight to them.
That is the real work of a relationship right there.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found some challenging but useful insights to take with you into your own conversations. Until next time, keep examining your habits, keep asking hard questions, and keep growing together. Take care, everyone.